Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought provoking conversations. India's diplomatic blitz to isolate Pakistan has suffered a body blow, with the top US general praising Islamabad's counter terror record as phenomenal. Now, General Michael Kurilla, who is the US commander for the Middle East and the Central Asia and South Asia, told lawmakers that Pakistan has been a phenomenal partner in America's counter-terrorism fight. Now, of course, this is a ringing endorsement which undercuts New Delhi's anti-Pakistan pitch. And not just this, today there are reports that Pakistan's army chief, Asim Munir, the sources have said that he's given a consent to attending Donald Trump's military parade on 14th of June. Now, imagine India has been lobbying hard across the world to blacklist and isolate Pakistan. That Pakistan is a terrorist state, it should be isolated. But what's happening instead? Donald Trump is not only appeasing Pakistan, but Donald Trump is also sending out signals very clearly to India that, look, we don't care what you feel about Pakistan, but for us to keep Pakistan by our side is very, very important. And our Prime Minister Narendra Modi doesn't speak, Foreign Minister doesn't say a bit. There is no objection from the MEA so far. What do we make of this? What do we make of this silence? Is it not one of the biggest snubs, or a diplomatic snub, if I could say, Donald Trump has unleashed on Prime Minister Modi? Joining me this evening is former Congress spokesperson, author, and political commentator Sanjay Jha. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining. And I'll begin with Asim Munir attending the military parade for Donald Trump on 14th of June. He's given a consent. And apparently, there are also reports that along with Asim Munir, there are several Pakistani officials who've already met the military officials in US time to time in the previous, in the past many months. Now, what would you really say? Is India sleeping? Is India reluctant? Or I don't know how to make of the reactions coming, the silence on the part of India.
Good evening, Nilu. The biggest lesson for all of us in India should be that the United States of America is going to be extremely opportunistic in its diplomatic and its geopolitical intentions. Please note that even as we talk, Donald Trump has talked about a breakthrough in the trade deal with China. It is a global, shall we say, public secret that Pakistan is propped up by China's military backing. We saw it during Operation Sindoor as well. So, what you're witnessing today is the fact that the United States, if you go back to the times when Afghanistan has gone through its own serious problems, especially with the Taliban, etc., during the time of Osama bin Laden, Pakistan was used by America. And Pakistan was very delighted to be a partner of America because they got a huge amount of funding by the US governments to become a prop to ensure that in Taliban, the US interests were protected. So there is a military and a funding relationship that has been historically very strong with Pakistan in the past. But please remember that Hafiz Saeed has had a 10 million bounty on him for decades, for a long time. And yet you find that America was willing to do business with Pakistan, right? So I think we got to understand this very categorically, that while India, especially under Mr. Modi as Prime Minister, has unfortunately hyphenated itself far too much with the United States. The US, if you look at their history, right on from Vietnam, Korea, Libya, Iraq, it's a country that essentially does love to create conflict, or if there is a conflict, they love to add fuel to the fire. And it's good for their defense industry, and it's good for American influence. And therefore, I think what you're witnessing today, especially with the the command general saying that Pakistan has been very successful as a counter-terrorism partner, is he's referring to basically to the support they've received from Pakistan and Afghanistan. But he is completely delinked Pakistan's role in the violent extremism and the horrific terrorism that India has faced at regular intervals. I mean, we have bled all the time. Pakistan's policy of bleeding India through 1,000 deaths is 1,000 cuts is continuing. So I think the Indian government of Mr. Modi has made, in my opinion, a strategic blunder, but allowing itself to be, in my opinion, used by the Americans as a pawn for their diplomatic forays. So, for example, if we are under this false illusion that we are guaranteed American support because America wants to use us as some kind of a bulwark against China, then we could be living in a fool's paradise. As you discover, Russia went neutral. China was on the side of Pakistan. America said Pakistan and India are both great friends, essentially saying we are equidistant, leaving us pretty isolated. I think there are lessons to be learned here.
But how do you think that now, when all this while Prime Minister Modi and the foreign minister have been quiet about whatever Trump has said so far, whether it is a ceasefire, whether it is the Operation Sindoor, whether it is the trade incentives, and now this that they've invited Asim Munir and what the US Central Command Chief has said about Pakistan, what do you think should be India's uh, way of resolving this foreign policy crisis? And I would call it crisis because at the moment, India's foreign policy looks like it is in an abyss. There is no direction to it. And how should India respond to a crisis? Because so far, I haven't seen any reaction coming in from the MEA. Not that if I have missed, but I don't know. But so far, there are no reactions to it.
If you listen to a lot of the defense analysts and foreign policy experts, they'll keep talking to you about strategic autonomy. During the time of Dr. Manmohan Singh, used to talk about strategic restraint. A lot of people believe that end of day, transactional, self-interested foreign policy is the only way forward. And as is apparent from the way Donald Trump's American foreign policy is, it's the way everybody is expected to be. You just kind of look at your own interest of your country, and you just ignore the larger neighborhood or even regional blocks, etc. But I think it's not as straightforward as that, Nilo. In my opinion, for example, if you look at the Ukraine case, it's a classic case. In the case of Ukraine, there was Russia invading Ukraine. It was literally a war declared by a bigger mothership country, the old Russia, attacking Ukraine for land, which they believe was their historical right, and believing that the people actually were more Russian than Ukrainians. But let's cut to what was our reaction. At a time when there were human rights violations, when you found children were being literally killed or kidnapped and taken into Russia, cities being bombed. We really weren't, as a country, making any strong condemnation. Now, you have to understand that while uh, you have a historical relationship with Russia, in politics and diplomacy, you have to be able to understand that you are a big democracy, at least in name. It's a large economy. It's part of the G20, and you have to kind of at least punch at your weight, if not above. And I think our compromises by actually supporting Russia or being neutral on the UN resolutions, it got a lot of people concerned that were we taking our own transactional, geopolitical stances too far? Because you were not even supporting it on human rights issues. I mean, there was a limit to how much you could say that this is realpolitik. So today, if you find the EU, for example, hasn't stood with India during the time of Operation Sindoor, which is a big critical bloc, not just America, because probably they saw that India was politic on Russian cheap oil. So here is my answer to your question. India needs to get its act together to start with in its own neighborhood. Because, see, that's where you have a direct interest because the land is contiguous, and you have, if there's a neighboring country in a problem, it impacts you. I mean, the best example would be Sri Lanka. If you look at Sri Lanka, when it had the big LTTE problem, we ended up losing a prime minister being assassinated. So I think it's important for India because you have on your borders in the north and the northwest, you have Pakistan and a China axis. Now, for a lot of people who make this big braggadocio talk about what we can do and how we can, invade POK, etc., it's important to kind of not get carried away by this whole hyper nationalistic narrative that the BJP markets. Just think about it, Nilu, that today you have Chinese investments because of its One Belt Road initiative in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, right? Uh, the second point is the fact that remember that actually Pakistan has ceded territory to China, given it a very critical portion of land. So that relationship between Pakistan and China effectively is a formidable threat for India. And we have to be very aware of the repercussions if that were to truly become a military conflict across the entire Pakistan China border. So you have to ensure that at least in your neighborhood, which is Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, you are on a strong wicket. You have to create strong bilateral equations. And which is why I have pointed out in my tweet of today that India during, I think, earlier years was seen as a country which was the regional lodestar, the one country which was part of the G20, the big economic hope along with China from Asia, and a large population, but a dynamic country on a very fast track growth. Over the last, I would say, a decade, to be frank, that story is weakened with China literally becoming a strategic investor, which is the prelude to becoming a military partner in our neighborhood. And imagine how much of a strategic vulnerability that creates for India. So that would be my first foreign policy initiative. And the second part would be that, don't get pushed by America. America eventually, I can tell you, will look for business. Americans are looking for markets. America is looking for cheap labor. That's why the big back office
Absolutely.
of Silicon Valley is in Bangalore and other parts of India. America wants us to buy their products, which is why Donald Trump has gone aggressive on tariffs. But think about it. Our trade deficit with China is over $100 billion, much more than the trade deficit that America has with us. America is bullying us down, and we are actually allowing the trade deficit with China to balloon. So I think India needs to recalibrate its foreign policy. Don't ignore EU because in EU you'll probably find a lot more support that you have expected. And I think the one part that I do want to add, my last point, Nilu, an important point. I think in terms of our foreign policy view on Gaza, we have lost the leadership of the global south that we were in the running for. I think that has now moved away from India because we have been seen more as a pro-Israeli, entity, and have largely towed the American line. I think that is another setback, and I think this government really doesn't have a foreign policy. In short,
But Sanjay, when you say that India needs to recalibrate its foreign policy, India looks like in a foreign policy coma right now. I don't know what they are going to recalibrate, but how will they do it when they are so silent, when they are so cagey about even responding to the slightest of snubs which are coming from Donald Trump? How will they recalibrate? I don't know. And now Prime Minister Modi is all set to visit Canada, which is going to host the G7 summit. I'm sure Donald Trump is again going to repeat uh, his refrain that it was America which brought in the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, and Prime Minister Modi will stand there and say nothing. What, I don't know about recalibration, how they will do it, but let alone all this, the basic fundamental response is also not coming from India. Is it not so bothersome? I mean, I'm just surprised that what is the reason for this kind of a chilling silence on the part of India.
well, Nilu, I can tell you that the belligerence that we showed through this laser eyes concept that is a popular meme on foreign policy these days was totally flawed. In foreign policy, you cannot afford to be arrogant. geopolitical circumstances change. Like, for example, anything can happen between two countries. What happens if tomorrow, for example, hypothetically, if China invades Taiwan? Things can happen. I mean, these are not things that, you can, there's nothing, there's no status quo per se in international relations. I felt that there was a time when we sounded unnecessarily belligerent for no reason. I mean, take the example of Canada. While we took a position that yes, there was a threat of terrorism or whatever, a threat to our national security emanating from Canada, we should have also been aware that Canada is part of the Five Eyes Alliance. And that has been a durable alliance for intelligence sharing. And at the end of the day, uh, the relationships between the Western nations have their own trajectory. So here is the point, that we ended up alienating countries that we need not have. I mean, these are things that actually have been very inexplicable in my mind. That, you heard Jaishankar as a foreign affairs minister or external affairs minister going and sounding more like a politician than a nuanced foreign or an external affairs minister. You don't go abroad and sound like a ultra nationalist, creating a domestic headline for getting all the internet trolls very excited. That's not foreign policy. I think there is a worry there. The Quad countries, we talked about Quad. Did the Quad countries stand with India during Operation Sindoor? And the answer is no. So I think the real issue I felt was that when Donald Trump made a very sarcastic comment on BRICS when Mr. Modi had gone to the White House, Mr. Modi did not even retaliate against that. I mean, the truth is this: if President Trump is making a statement on the ceasefire or Kashmir, or he talks about being an intermediary in any other issues between India and Pakistan, the response cannot go from Jay Shankar or Vikram Mishri or some, Rajnath Singh. It has to go from Prime Minister Modi. This is a literally, you got to talk to your counterpart. Donald Trump, as a president of the United States, has said it over a double dozen times that I brokered the deal using trade as a very strong negotiating instrument to get a military ceasefire. You haven't heard Mr. Modi contradict that. And these bland, boilerplate statements from MEA or some other, this is not going to cut ice. I think the bottom line is that foreign policy is eventually determined by the political leader of the country. For example, today, if the BJP can't have the cake and eat it too, so when Operation Sindoor happens, the BJP wants to tell everybody that, Mr. Modi took this extremely far-sighted decision. Okay, although we all know it's the Indian armed forces who were given the independence to do what they wanted to do, and they should be applauded for the success of Operation Sindoor. On the other hand, the BJP wants to protect Mr. Modi without realizing that the country precedes a government or a political party. Now, Mr. Modi can't say that, I am, the big muscular hero of India, and at the same time duck, avoid, and dodge questions that are being raised all over the world. You can't have the cake and eat it
You
too.
know,
And I think there,
absolutely.
Mr. Modi, in my opinion, the biggest blunder that he's done over the last 10 years is to use foreign policy and national security to push his political agenda in India for
Absolutely.
winning elections. That to me is the biggest tragedy of Indian foreign policy.
Absolutely, and I think that is the biggest reason why things have reached this kind of a situation. But I'm just wondering, Sanjay, we saw these multi-party delegations going all across, lobbying for India that we need to isolate Pakistan. Pakistan is a terrorist state. Now, when Asim Munir goes and sits next to Donald Trump on the military parade, doesn't that exercise, and if India is not objecting to it, doesn't it make that entire exercise of the multi-party delegations going across the world look like a fruitless exercise? These multi-party delegations look like fools that they visited all these countries and they are come back, they've returned to India only to know what Donald Trump is in doing in reality.
Nelu, let me tell you, you've hit the nail on the head. Please remember that in the interim period, or rather during the time when these very excited, extremely thrilled people were out there in different countries trying to create this diplomatic offensive, the truth is that Pakistan became part of the United Nations Security Council's vice chairman of the Counter Terrorism Center. It's called the CTC. Can you believe that? Pakistan sponsors terrorism. We all know they had a hand in the Pahalgam massacre. And Pakistan becomes the vice chair of the Counter Terrorism Center of the UN Security Council. Where is Mr. Jaishankar? Where is Mr. Modi? Where is the entire foreign policy infrastructure of India? And the overseas all party delegations, I've had some friends from the Congress who are part of it, but I got to call a spade a spade. It was nothing but a highly hyped up grand jamboree. Listen, you can do press conferences there, make some very, you know, interesting sound bites, and it might look attractive on Instagram. But the truth is that what are you going to gain by meeting a few think tanks? What are you going to gain by meeting an assortment of people across the political spectrum? How many heads of state did you meet? How many external affairs or secretary of states did you meet? And what did they say after that? Can you imagine that already Pakistan has also been made the chairman of the Taliban Sanctions Committee? These are important positions for Pakistan. And let me tell you the other part. The overseas delegations, would they be successful in putting Pakistan back in the Financial Action Task Force? That's the job of the government. Let me add another question that nobody's mentioned. The BJP keeps talking about Mr. Owaisi being part of it. Well, now that he's back and Mr. Owaisi is saying that withdraw the Waqf Bill board, will the BJP do that? That's what I'm saying, that we are living in a fool's paradise. Now, I can tell you that this entire overseas delegation, frankly, between you and me, I don't know how many of them even knew foreign policy. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to call it out. How many of them really understood the history or the nuances or the dynamics of the foreign policy other than the briefs they must have got from the Ministry of External Affairs? And you don't just go out there and parrot it. I can understand that if you want to treat this as a feel good, we are meeting people, we've just made our case, fair enough. A real tangible output, absolute zero. And to be frank, premature. Frankly speaking, if Operation Sindoor is technically on, why do you need to make the case? You need to actually make your borders safer. Make sure that there are no drones coming into India. Make sure that people don't die in the borders of India like they died at Poonch or Rajouri or Uri, which nobody talked about. Make India safe. Find out where are those 4 terrorists who slaughtered our people in cold blood. Find out who is accountable for the security lapse and the intelligence failure in both Pahalgam and Pulwama. Why have we forgotten Pulwama? I think this government is so obsessed with PR, publicity, propaganda, and this big, this Bollywood dialogue bazi, which everybody from the BJP seems to have become. I invite the BJP to come to Mumbai and become part of the film industry. But right now, you've been voted to run the country. Be responsible, move beyond rhetoric, bring governance, acknowledge where you went wrong. Talk to the other political parties. For God's sake, the BJP doesn't even realize, Neelu, that the Congress party has been in government for the longest time. You won 1947 war, the whole war with Pakistan. The first one started very early. And then you had 1965, 1971. Engage, bring in people together, share ideas. But Mr. Modi wants to treat, everything is about him, right? There is no BJP, there is no government. It's all about Narendra Modi, cutouts and all the big, it's absolutely preposterous that India at such a sensitive time is discussing one man who's proved to be extremely incompetent in managing India's national security and, frankly speaking, keeping our borders safe. Don't forget, Uri happened, and he talked of a surgical strike as if it was the first time when it had happened before. But simply it was made public because it suited Mr. Modi's politics. Did that stop Pulwama from happening? Did Balakot, that happened as a follow up, as an aftermath to Pulwama, did it stop Pahalgam from happening? This government needs to understand that sometimes it makes sense to actually kind of lie low and do what the country should be doing in the interest of the people. BJP and Mr. Modi seem to be just obsessed with living from one election, state or national, to the next. And I think the ordinary people of India, Nilu, are paying the price.
One last question, Sanjay, that at G7, I'm just assuming when Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump come face to face, or their diplomatic delegations when they meet, are they really going to raise these basic issues with America? Or do you think that they will skirt those issues and then, try and lace it up with something else? And then again, they'll brag it up as always Prime Minister Modi does.
Well, let me tell you that the truth is this, that India needs to now look at foreign policy a lot more seriously than it has done over the last 10 years. It has run very whimsically, if you ask me. Mr. Modi decided, we will not talk to the separatists in Jammu and Kashmir. And that was decided right at the very beginning. Although he started by talking about Kashmiriyat, Insaniyat, and Jamhuriyat, which is what Atal Bihari Vajpayee wanted. He took a decision that we'll have no diplomatic engagement with Pakistan. He decided on his own he will land up to meet Nawaz Sharif during Nawaz Sharif's family wedding in Lahore. Mr. Modi's done everything the way he's wanted to do them. He decided up ki baad Trump sarkar. This is not the way foreign policies run in any country. Yes, and you can see what's happening to America today. Donald Trump is the laughing stock of the world. He's doing everything the way he wants. Tariff announced, tariff withdrawn, tariff paused. I will invade, Canada. Now I will talk to Canada. He wants to annex Greenland. I mean, this is whimsical. This is capricious. This is laughable. And I think India should understand that we are not America. We're still a small economy. All this drums being beating about 4 trillion economy. For God's sake, it's 4 trillion with 1,400 million people. We are the lowest in per capita income in G20 countries. How long can Mr. Modi's government run with this obsession that we can hoodwink the people of India on
Absolutely.
data, on economics, on society, on foreign policy, on national security, even a military confrontation, by just using big media to do the propaganda? And I think this is a message to the big media of India. You want to be responsible, ask questions of Mr. Modi, and I believe this government will be called out for being the biggest disaster since independence. But the big media is compromised, which is why, Nilu, I'm talking to you, which is why I think that amongst the journalists I talk to, you are one of the best, and I need to say that.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Sanjay. But I do indeed believe that this is an opportunity now for India Alliance to come up with an alternative plan, as far as the foreign policy is concerned. Can they come up? Can they really provide an alternative framework? Let's wait and watch. Except for tweeting, that's what we have seen, that the many opposition leaders, they tweet and they forget the issue. But let's hope that they take this also as an opportunity to provide an alternative to the foreign policy abyss which we see now currently with the Modi government. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.